Hello Internet, Daniel with Driving and Dragons, and I'm coming back to you today with a little bit of a, I guess you could call it gaming philosophy video, spurred on by a X post that was made by our friend the Ultra American TTRPGer, who is on YouTube now, so you should check out the Ultra American TTRPGer. I'll put a link in the description. Check out, like, share, and subscribe to him, and while you're at it, tell everybody to like, share, and subscribe to me. But today we're going to talk a little bit about player agency. In specific, the player who is most often forgotten at the table, the Game Master. On the Z, continuing with the dismantling and deconstruction of the distributor that will ultimately be replaced, and trying to do a little extra. We might actually have some walk around video this time, depending on how long this video runs. So let's talk about this. The X post or tweet or whatever you want to call it that spurred this on, the Ultra American TTRPGer said, everyone talks about player agency, but no one talks about Game Master agency. He said, this is why I fucking love the people like Dying Breed Tabletop or in the hobby. They say the shit needs to be said out loud, because he was, of course, retweeting Nerd Cognito and his stream. I, of course, had a response to this, and my response was to take that a step further. Everyone talks about player agency, but forgets that the Game Master is a player and the world is his character, to say nothing of their failure to understand agency. Along with alignment, player agency is one of my biggest soapboxes / whipping posts. And it's mainly because here in recent years, there has been what I typically refer to as a toxic obsession with player agency. And it's really not an obsession with player agency. It's an obsession with this idea of player agency that is really a warped and twisted, perverted form of what player agency is supposed to be. When you get a lot of the 5e player base, not necessarily just the 5e player base, but in particular the perpetually online, safety tool waving, DEI inclusion, wheelchair dungeon sect, that perpetually online, no life, needs to touch grass sect of the 5e player base, they don't mean player agency when they say it. They have a perversion that they use the words player agency to represent. So, as we all know, I'm big on defining terms. Let's just start with the good old-fashioned dictionary definition of agency as it relates to this. The capacity, condition, or state of acting or of exerting power. It can also be a person or thing through which power is exerted or an end is achieved, i.e., communicated through the agency of the ambassador, or he has agency in this regard. These are the two definitions that player agency comes from. It literally means that the player has the capacity to exert power over what his character does. The player is the person who has agency to exert power or achieve an end as the player character. Now, one thing that's very important to keep in mind there is you notice that this is a very proactive word. This is a very proactive term. The player has the ability to exert power over their character. It's very specific, over their character, over the ends and the actions of their character, and it's very specific. It is a state of the ability to exert that power and to act through that end. You are acting through your character, not acting around your character, not acting through your character's environment, not acting through the world around your character, acting through your character, okay? Now, one other piece that's a problem here is people say player, and we use this as shorthand to mean the players who are running player character, as opposed to someone who is actually playing the game. Because the Game Master is also a player. We are all players. You assume the role of a character, I assume the role of the Game Master. That is my character. And the Game Master is the nebulous underlying authority. The Game Master is the narrative. Okay, I know that there's a lot of people out there, especially some of your certain areas of the OSR, that just get right up in arms about that. Oh, the narrative is naturally comes from the actions of the players. The GM has no influence on anything. Don't prep a damn thing. And, there is no storyline. Why do you have a plot? There's no plot, because a plot means that you're taking away the player's agency. It should all be whatever the players do. You just don't even prep. Just have some random tables so that you can determine what they find in room X and how big room X is and how long room X is. All right, that's just poppycock. That's bullshit. Okay, there is a style of play for that. There is the dungeoneering and adventuring style. There's even your Braunstein Fog of War style play. That is different than what tabletop role-playing games are now. It really is. Tabletop role-playing games are narrative games at heart. Even when you go back to the dungeon crawling adventuring days of BASIC and of AD&D First Edition, where you are doing a lot of things with random tables, you are still crafting stories and crafting myths through the vessel or through the vehicle of the game. And that comes from two very distinct and really two very involate sets of principles. The first of those principles is the one that we have a problem with here, player agency. The second is the one that is often forgotten, which is the player agency of the game master. Because the game master's agency is everything in all times and places except for the present of the character and their future. So what do I mean happens? What I mean is that the DM has no authority over a player character, the individual character, and what that character attempts to do in the world. Nor do they have any control over what that character will do. So that means that if I say as a player character that I want to try to jump over a gorge, all I can do is all the game master can really do for that player is provide the sensory input for that character. Hey, I'm going to jump over the gorge. Okay? You see the gorge. The gorge is 100 yards across. You know that you can't make this jump. If they say, hey, I'm still going to jump, or I'm going to make a running jump, that's their agency. Their agency is you don't just stop them from doing it. And you don't tell them they're not allowed to make the attempt. You can tell them that they know beyond a shadow of a doubt it'll fail, because that is knowledge their character would have through simple observations. You do not have any control over what they will do. That is within the player's purview. The decisions the player makes, what the player determines to use the information you provide for. You don't tell them, hey, this is what you think. You tell them this is what you see. Now, what they see may not be accurate. You may say, hey, you see a shadow out of the corner of your eye. There may not be a shadow. They may have had a failed roll and now they see something that's not there. But you give them the information of their perception and what they choose to do with it and how they choose to perceive it and how they choose to act on it. That is player agency. However, that is the end of player agency. They choose how their character perceives the information. They choose how their character acts upon the information. They choose how their character chooses to deal with the information. Everything else is the game master's purview. And when a player does something like, for instance, say, well, I have this thing in my backstory and you can't change it, that intrudes on the game master's agency. Let's give an example here. Well, my character's backstory is he's the lost prince in a long line that has been ousted from his kingdom and several generations ago. Like, okay, that is what your character believes. Your character believes that he is the scion of a lost line, that he was the great-grandson of a king who was disposed and he's fighting to reclaim his kingdom. He believes that. He was told that as a child. He may even have other people who've told him. But if the game master goes back and says, you weren't really the scion of a lost line, and you find out later in the game that that was actually just kind of a bullshit story that granddaddy told you were really pig farmers, the player has no gripe there. There is no player agency. You're not robbing them of their agency by doing that and changing their backstory. No, You perceived this. Here's the new facts that shows that that's not correct. Okay? Now, should the game master do that without some other reason that is compelling and provides more impetus for interactive gameplay, that provides more instigation for that player to act? No, he shouldn't. You shouldn't just randomly do stuff. That goes back to the golden rule, rule -0. Rule -1, it's before rule 0. Don't be an asshole. But the game master's agency is everything else in the world. What color something's, what smells come in, what you see, how every other character acts and reacts. Whether or not something is possible is the purview of the game master, and that is within their agency. You get these people who are like, oh, if you don't allow a roll, you are interfering with agency. No, I'm not. Previous example, you're going to jump over the gorge. I'm going to try anyway. It's like, okay, you fail. Well, what do you mean I fail? Yeah, you fall to your death. Well, you didn't even give me a roll. Yes, I told you that in the perception of your character, you knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that that was not possible. There is no need for a roll. The result was already determined. If you would like, you are welcome to roll to see how far out into the gorge you got before you fell to your death. Tell you what, let's make it fun. If you roll a critical failure, I'll rule that you trip over a rock and bust your nose on the side of the gorge before you ever make the jump, so at least you just take 1d4 damage instead of falling to your death. Okay? When to call for a roll? That is the game master's agency. A player never knows when they need a roll. Okay? I want to try to seduce the bar wench. I'm going to roll persuasion. I didn't tell you to roll persuasion. How do you know that persuasion is even necessary here? How do you know it's even possible? How do you know that it's even possible to fail? Maybe the bar wench is a complete skank and she just throws it to everybody and doesn't care. Maybe you don't have to roll for it. Or maybe it doesn't matter what you're doing. No matter what, when you approach, no matter how good you roll, the bouncer who happens to be her boyfriend is going to break a table over your head. Okay? You don't know these things. So a player doesn't call for rolls. A game master does. Because the world and everything in it is the game master's character. Every NPC is a game master PC. Every creature is the game master. The weather is the game master. The laws of physics are the game master. Game master has a duty to keep those things within a reasonable understanding so that everybody has a certain, it doesn't have to be our reality, but has a reality that the game is simulating that the players can rely on to make their decision. However, it is ultimately the game master's agency to control the world. Guess what? The overall movement within that world is also the game master's agency. I talked about this in my last video a little bit about through lines, like historical through lines when you create a campaign, when you create a setting, when you do world building, and about how the world is not at the whim of the player. It doesn't hinge on the player's decisions. The world is moving in a certain direction for a myriad of reasons. The players get to be kind of at the nexus of it. They are at the pivotal point in time where their actions may have some influence on the slight direction it changes, but overall the world is moving in a certain way. That is the game master's agency, and the players don't have any right or any reasonable expectation that they can change it. And this even goes into the situation where you start talking about sandbox-style campaigns. Yes, you have the complete control to say, my character is going to walk south. I am going to go east. I am going to go into the mountain. I am going to go into the forest. However, the game master has put forth that the forest is where there's things going on. There's goblin bandits in the forest, and you need to, the town would really like to pay you to take care of them. Yeah, fuck the town. I'm going into the mountains. Okay, we go into the mountains. The GM is there is no obligation to the game to put something in the mountains for you as a adventure just because you chose to go there. Sure, maybe you have some random encounters, you come across a mountain lion or something like that. But there is no obligation. If you go off into the plains when the swamp is where everything is pointing, and all you get going through the plains is a dusty, dry mouth because you ran out of water and you saw a couple of giraffes and you eventually got to some other city that doesn't have a problem going on, that's on you. You chose to move away from the action in the story. And that is where Game Master Agent comes in. He has the agency to create, craft, and build the world. He creates the river, and the player characters simply get to choose whether or not they are going to climb in and which direction they're going to swim. I'm going to use this analogy because it's from Dragonlance, which I think is a great analogy. And it's an analogy used for time and time travel and changing the past in the Dragonlance. They say that time is like a river. And when you time travel, you can get up and you can move to a different point in the river and jump back in. But you moving from one point to the other does not change the river. Now, in Dragonlance, there's some very specific things that kind of exist outside of time, like certain races that are not technically supposed to exist, that exist outside of time and therefore can change the path of history. But normal humans and elves and ogres, when they go forward or back in time or anything like that, they do not have the ability to change the events of history, no matter what they do. Something always corrects it to make sure that the overall flow of history continues to move in a certain order. Time is a river, you are but a rock. And what point of the river I throw the rock in may make a small splash, but it will not change the course of the river. That is the same thing when it comes to agency in the world and the game master and the players. Sure, the players may be part of some pivotal moments in history, but when it comes to the general flow of that river, them choosing to swim against the current, swim with the current, swim across the river, go under the water, go over the water, not get in the water at all, does not change the direction that the water is flowing overall. And if they choose to ignore the direction in which the game master has chosen to take the world, they do not have any right to complain that they were somehow cheated or ignored because they really wanted the adventure to be over there, so it's their player agency to go over there and have an adventure. No, it's the game master's agency to say whether or not there is an adventure over there. Congratulations, you went to the mountain. You found rocks. Do you like rocks? Look at the rocks. It's not even a particularly difficult mountain. You didn't even find a cave. You found a shallow place you could sleep for the night, but otherwise it was just a pleasant day walking in the mountains. Well, where's the adventure? Isn't there like a troll cave or something up here? No. There's goblin bandits back there in the forest. That's a problem that's happening in this local area. They didn't say anything about trolls in them. You chose to go there because you have the agency to choose that. But as the game master, I have the agency to say that's not what's happening in this world right now. The big thing here is that the respect has to go both ways. I was talking earlier about changing elements in backstory, how the player only has agency over their own perception. They can tell you how their character perceives their backstory. Now, if they say, hey, I got a scar on my face because I got cut in a knife fight, you don't go change the knife fight. That's something they clearly would have known. However, you can change elements about it because they only have their character's perception of why they were attacked with. Only the game master knows why somebody attacked them with a knife. Maybe they thought it was just a random tavern brawl and it was really somebody who had a vendetta against their family. But you should be respectful and, like I said, not be an asshole. Regard. Meaning that if your player has worked up a pretty decent backstory for the character, you should look for hooks within. The game master should only really change elements, adjust things, and adjust their story within the world if it's something that just doesn't work for that overall narrative. If their backstory is trying to change the flow of the river, adjust it accordingly. But you don't just willy-nilly, without cause, change things, because that's just you being a jerk. The same has to go the opposite direction for the game master from the players. The players must respect that the world and the narrative, and when I say the narrative in this case, I literally mean the actual descriptions of what is happening in the world around them, the things their characters perceive, what they hear, what they see, what they smell, what they taste. Those must be respected the same way. They are inviolate, because that is the game master's agency. So anyway, what do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section below. Like, share, and subscribe. Send your friends here. Let's get these things up here. I'm over 300 subs now. We are getting closer and closer to the 1,000 mark. Christmas is only a couple months away, and that's the target goal, is to be at 1,000 by Christmas. And I'd really like to make that because, 1,000 subs, I can start monetizing things, which means I can start dumping money into cars, which is really what I want to be able to do. I've got some pictures that I'm going to post up and show you guys of some potential project vehicles running around. I want to make them, I want to build them, and I want to give them away to the people who've been here. So send those subscribers my way, and let's see what we can do. Otherwise, leave your opinion below, because I love those conversations. I'm always active in that comment section, replying back and forth. I love to see what people have to say, whether they agree with me or not. But I'll see you guys next time.